I know you don't take credit personally for these awards. You say it is a team effort. Run us through a few of those deals that you and the team put together last year.
I think the one that's caught everyone's eye, of course, is the Walmart deal, the Walmart acquisition of Massmart. It's a very significant acquisition in the South African sense, in that it's the first major retailer internationally to come into this market. You know, we've been working on that deal for 3 years now. Been working very closely with the Walmart team. And what was interesting is in the run-up to that, the institutional investors suddenly got wind of the attractiveness of the sector, and you saw the run in the sector, which really was, I guess, unfortunate for us from a pricing perspective. But it's a great recognition of the consumer opportunity which exists not only in South Africa but in the African continent. You know, when you start to compound the real GDP growth that we're achieving, on top of that you've got the movement of people up the LSM curve, so that you've got new shoppers in almost every category, people buying a house for the first time, a car for the first time, a fridge for the first time, food that you can keep in a fridge for the first time. It means that you're getting this compound growth of those two factors. Add to that urbanization, add to that the formalization of the market, and you can see that what we're achieving is real significant growth in this market, in the consumer space, something like 10% a year for the next 10 years has been estimated. And when you set that against what retailers can achieve in developed markets, you can see the attractiveness. But of course it comes with risks, and that's the balance that we need to establish with our clients coming in from foreign countries.
This was a deal that was rejigged partway through, and that was because, as you said, institutional investors in South Africa suddenly saw the value that foreign retailers were seeing in the South African market. Do you think this is going to be a theme going forward, where local investors will want to benefit to the upside from the foreign investors coming into the country and to remain invested in the acquisition targets, perhaps?
Absolutely. In fact, it was something we sort of saw coming down the road. I was fortunate enough to advise Associated British Foods when they acquired Illovo, and we went through a very similar process that local investors were very keen to stay invested. And they have a compelling logic, which is when you've got these magnificent South African companies and they get taken off the exchange, there's a limited universe for them to reinvest back into. So they want to stay, not only because it's got greater growth potential with the new partner coming in, but equally, what do I do with big lumps of cash now when I receive it? So you're absolutely right, Stephen. That's exactly the position, and you know, it's a sort of a, like everything in life, you can check the positive and the negative of it. For Walmart, they look at Walmex, their operation in Mexico, which is structured in exactly this way, and it's been a fabulously successful operation. And so for us to go back to Walmart and as part of this process and to explain to them that if it was that shareholders need to do this, let's have an open mind, because there are great advantages to do it. There are costs, of course, and then it becomes more complicated for us to structure this, because you've got very expensive technology which has been created and deployed, and how do you account for that in part ownership? How do you deal with all of the issues which are very simple under complete control, an independent board, for example? So it makes the deal more complex, but I think it's a fantastic way to do it. And perhaps to come back to your original question, do I think it's a theme going forward? I do, actually. I think it's a very strong theme going forward, not only in South Africa but across the world.
And do you think the African consumer is also a theme going forward? And what sorts of companies would that be attracting, perhaps using South Africa as a gateway into Africa?
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of talk about, is South Africa a gateway into Africa? And we've done a lot of work to look into that, to say, is that the case? And the answer is actually yes, it is. Not only in terms of potential, but actually what's been happening over the last 5 or 6 years. If you look at the investors into sub-Saharan Africa since 2004, it's dominated by 2 nations, China and South Africa. And the South African investment, and South Africa is marginally ahead of China, inches. If you look at the South African component of that, a significant amount is coming out of South African based companies which have foreign ownership. So they are using the South African base. But it's very selective growth into Africa. You know, of the roughly 50 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, from the analysis and work that we've done for our clients, we estimate there's roughly 12 markets that, if you compare the risk of investing in that market relative to the return of investing in that market actually make sense. A lot of them are just too small to make economic sense. A lot of them are just far too risky politically, economically, and otherwise. If you look at that group of 12 that we've identified, Nigeria is the one outlier I think is a great investment opportunity, but it's perhaps on the riskier end of the scale, which would make it 13. There's a great opportunity, but it's on a very selective basis. But there's great interest in Africa.
How about the resources space? You talked about China. We know that China is hungry for resources. Yep. It has been looking for those in Africa. Do you think the resources space is going to be a driver of M&A activity going forward from here as well?
Look, there are two issues that worry me in the resources space, and certainly I think are worrying our clients that speak to us. The one is around the whole regulatory issues. We need to get to some point of certainty around regulation. What is happening with mining rights? What's happening with empowerment? I think any investor wants a little bit of degree of certainty into the future so that they can make the investment. And I think that is uncertain at the moment, and there's a lot of discomfort around the regulatory space. And we're hearing it very loud and clear. And if you look at the investment into our resources sector during this resources boom, it's been far below what it has been relative to our peers around the world. The second issue is infrastructure. And that's something, of course, which affects the whole of our economy. But we've got an enormous amount to do in infrastructure in this country to allow us to get the kind of growth that we need to achieve. And for an investor into any sort of resource operation in South Africa, whether it's primary or secondary, the infrastructure is absolutely crucial to achieving that. Always remembering that the vast majority of our mineral resource is inland. So it creates an issue for us. David,
very quick question. You look at these deals all the time. What's next in South Africa? What sort of big deals could we look for this year? Which space is going to be a target?
It's interesting. I think, for me personally, I still fancy the consumer space. I think it's the area that our internationals will look at very closely. So I think within the consumer space, I think there's a lot of interest in South Africa. I hope that on the resources side, it's money coming in and not money going out. But I suppose there's possibilities around there. The one area of our economy where I think the data deal is a good trigger is in the IT space. It's certainly somewhere which has been quiet for an enormously long time, and I'm not quite sure why. I suppose it's an instinct, but I feel that there's something likely to happen there. But certainly within resources, but of course, not beg your pardon, but infrastructure. In infrastructure, it's going to be big. I'm just not sure that there's enough political will for it to happen this year. But the moment the political will delivers the capacity for public-private partnerships, that's a very, very big space for South Africa.